Welcome, guys. Welcome back to Be Rich. Today, we're going to talk about something very interesting about the inflation and deflation. How, in the world, on the macroeconomic level, things can be very different from different parts of the world. We have been talking about the Western countries and America, how inflation needs to be tamed, inflation needs to be tamed. The runaway inflation is a very bad thing, and we're given historical problems in countries around the world where inflation ran away and what happened to countries and governments and societies because of runaway inflation. But as this is happening to the better part of the world, there are parts of the world which are not experiencing inflation. So you might be thinking, oh, they're not experiencing inflation, that means that's good news. Well, it's not the case, it's not so. And it's not some small unknown country somewhere. I thought Sashwath can walk us through the article he read in Financial Times about which country we're talking about and why the opposite of inflation can be quite staggering and why it has implications to us because of the country which it's involved in.
Yeah, so the country which she's been hinting at is China, none other than China, the red dragon, as you will. And it's been a country which has had a meteoric rise over the past few decades, since the 90s at least. And they've become the factory of the world, and they have had a persistent trade surplus. So that basically means that they're exporting more than they're importing. So China is a sort of authoritarian, quasi-authoritarian state. It's a command-based economy. It's not really something which is free and open. So consumption, like how consumption is done in the US or in Europe or even India for that matter, is not something you see as much in China. Chinese consumption is completely different than your Western consumption and even your Indian consumption, which we do. So that being said, China has never, although, had deflation as much in the past few years. But as of late, as the headlines have been saying all over the world, China has started teetering on the edge of deflation. It has a very little amount of inflation there, predominantly coming from rising gas prices. But now, because of their energy controls, what's ended up happening is that their core inflation, that is, if you strip off gas and food, has come to zero. So they're on the edge of deflation. Deflation is if it goes into negative territory, they're on the fence. So deflation, as we've talked about on this channel, is terrible for a country. If it hits you, so think of it like this. There are two ways in which you can be. You can be in an emaciated or starving state, or you can be in a gluttonous state. But what most doctors advise is that it's good to have a little bit of plump on you.
Yes.
It's good to have a little bit of fat on you so that in case you're not able to eat properly for a week or so, it'll tidy out, your body can do its natural thing. That's why we have fat stores. But on the flip side, a doctor will always advise an emaciated person to eat more. The reason is because you don't want to be on this edge of things, because one fell swoop, you're done for. And when you look at a country, what ends up happening when a country is in deflation is just like a disease. It's a spiral. And once your people have reduced their consumption, because they believe that prices will fall further afterwards, they'll reduce their consumption. So what you'll end up having is a burgeoning amount of saving. First, China is a big exporter. So already you have a trade balance surplus. So they have an enormous amount of money which they've been pumping into treasury bills. They've been pumping it into US stocks, venture capital firms. They've been trying to plug in their money, shove it in whatever corner possible. They're overflowing with money. And the second reason being that people aren't consuming. One way in which a country does away with its surplus is by buying foreign goods. But with China, what's ended up happening is now they're not buying anything. The consumption has come down, and deflation has hit the property market. Prices of properties have come down, and we just saw the second largest real estate firm in China collapse momentously over a period of a day, where it was a flash crash, if you will. And so China is brewing under structural as well as macroeconomic problems. And all of that stems from their zero COVID policy, which I'll let you take over on that.
You're absolutely right. It all stems from their zero COVID policy. Whatever you may say, the zero COVID policy which they enforced, they might have done more harm to them than they did any good. Because finally, even in terms of public health, they finally had to open their economy up. Once COVID became metamorphosized into a very infectious virus, it started spreading through the population no matter what lockdowns they had enforced. And the virus ran through their population rampantly and very fast, killing a lot of Chinese, and it was very sad. But in result, they lost on both accounts. They lost on the humanitarian front, and now they're paying the price of the economic war they tried to wage against the COVID lockdowns, and it's a terrible mess they're in right now.
Ironically, they were one of the first few countries to really ramp up vaccine production and vaccinate the population.
Unfortunately, the vaccine in the long run has proven to be not very
Effective.
yeah, the efficacy of the vaccine is very poor.
Yes.
So in the long run, wherever they did supply this vaccine, wasn't very useful. I mean, it has an efficacy of 50%, which is way lower than
Your
all other
average
Moderna
Pfizer
and other,
and
Pfizer. And that led to another whole set of problem that created more distress within the local population with their own Sinovacs.
Yes.
So that, and they had two different categories of internal vaccine given. One was even worse than this. So it is unfortunate what had happened. But instead of saying, okay, we made a mistake and opening up the economy and saying, okay, let's face, as the world was opening up and facing inflationary pressures, they still brutally held on to the zero COVID policy.
Yes.
Pushing their economy into this tailspin which it's in right now.
Yeah.
And all of you are wondering, so what? Why do we get?
Yeah.
The problem with deflation is like what Sashwath said. You rather have, if you're diabetic, you rather have high sugar. Because high sugar will kill you slowly over a long period of time. But if you have low sugar, you'll be dead very fast.
Yeah.
That's the problem with deflation. Deflation can not only cripple, it can stall everything. Society itself can come to a grinding halt very rapidly.
Yes.
Because there's no movement in your economic cycles. People are not buying, people are just, whatever they have, they just tend to save, and there's nowhere that money is being used. Money which is not being used, which is just being saved, not everybody can save every single dollar which is there, and nothing can happen. And there's a huge distrust in the government right now. And people who are very wealthy and who are very well off in China all want to exit Chinese yuan. They don't want to hold the ringgit, they don't want to hold the yuan, they want to exit. So things are very tough that way. On top of it, this coupled with this zero COVID policy has led to huge unemployment in the youth, which is standing at a staggering 20%. 20% of the Chinese youth are out of work right now.
Surprisingly, India's unemployment rate among the youth still stands higher than China's.
Yeah, that's another kettle of fish. We don't want to, if we mention anything regarding India, people seem to be thinking we're taking a dig at the government. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll refrain from diving into India since we talk about global issues here. Anand can take up the India issues with you guys. There's a huge problem, unemployment in the youth. And this spurring on with the advancement of AI, which is going off in a tailspin, is going to be even more devastating for the Chinese. At least in the Western countries, AI has some kind of, governments are slowly trying to get some kind of throttle on it. But in China, there is no throttle on these things.
Yeah.
People can be going on a renegade experiment. So AI in China must be going on a unleashed. So we're going to see Chinese unemployment go through the roof. 20% is just the beginning of the tip of the iceberg, is what I feel.
Yeah, and so the Politburo or whatever, the collective, Chinese Communist Party collective, which makes up monetary policy. So what they've done is they've said we're going to bring in stimulus, and they've tried to take not drastic measures, rather they've avoided drastic measures. They've said we won't immediately ramp up to very drastic measures. We're still going to try and poke the economy with a stick and see if it moves.
Yeah, and in that spirit, they've got a guy who's completely outside the political circle as the new head of their central bank, the Chinese central bank.
Yeah.
There's a lot of news about that and flurry about that. Who's this guy? Why are they suddenly? What is in the mind of the leader? Net result, even that guy doesn't know what's happening in the mind of the leader.
So instead of so consumption is a big problem there, or declining consumption, I should say. Instead of providing stimulus to the people, what the Communist Party has done is it's given stimulus to companies and corporates, which so your real estate market, they've given
they've been bailing them all out.
Yeah, bailing them out. But what it takes a lot of time for it to trickle down.
It takes too long to trickle down. Yes, it eventually never trickles down.
Yeah.
Whatever trickles down takes too long, and most of it gets clogged up.
Right.
It's like trying to pour water through a very thick filter, and that was extremely dirty water.
Yeah.
So it takes a long time to go through the membrane and reach the bottom, and that's why people are waiting.
Yeah.
And what you'll see is a lot of head rolls, a lot of cleansing parties going on, like what's happening in Russia. A lot of generals have gone missing. I'm sure in China, a lot of officials will suddenly go missing.
Yeah.
There's a very famous video which came where the ex-party leader, senior leader, is sitting next to Xi Jinping, and that guy's talking to him and shaking his head, and suddenly two guys come and grab that guy and take him out on live TV, and he's like wondering what happened. So a lot of guys will be probably going missing there because a lot of heads have to roll when such a mess is prevalent across the country.
Heads roll before the good times roll.
Correct, it's true. And it's very sad what's happening to the Chinese people because of lack of poor management and poor leadership what has led to this fiasco within China.
And when you should be using a defibrillator on the Chinese economy, which is the heart, instead of using the defibrillator on the Chinese economy, what they've done is they've said, let's put him under observation. Let's try to give small doses through the IV drip and see what happens. But what Chinese officials, well, the ex-finance minister has sort of understood it, but again, he's the ex-finance minister for a reason.
Correct.
So what he said...
Because he understood it, he became ex.
So what he said was that you need to provide, and he's very careful, measured his words very carefully still.
He better, because he's got still assets in China. No?
Right. And what he said is that the party needs to do more in order to be able to... he said we need to do more in order to be able to provide more stimulus to the bottom layer so you don't rely on trickle-down economics. Yes, trickle-down economics makes sense. But when you need room for fast action, you need to provide more drastic measures, and China needs to sort of let go of its mentality of let things take time and provide immediate relief to the bottom section. And something which is even more pertinent is that China's burgeoning savings, which has meant that although there is a lot of savings in the economy, the party still controls the interest rate to a large extent, in the sense that even if there's a lot of supply of funds, the party still determines to a large extent how big lenders are able to borrow at what rates, and who gets to borrow, who doesn't get to borrow. So there's a huge mismatch in terms of how much savings there is and how much returns are being made as well. So all this points towards a really ineffective system. And it was working well until they were able to export and they were making a trade surplus. But clearly things have changed post the COVID policy.
Yeah, and they're doing the famous classic gameplay all authoritarian governments do. As soon as things get tough economically, do some saber rattling.
Yeah.
That's why they're getting very stiff diplomatically, and all their foreign diplomats are very stiff, and their relationship with the US is frozen over. And all the saber rattling which is happening over Taiwan is also around
And
that.
they also have an aging population, which
is only going to make things worse.
Way worse. And that's aging population is a pressure of deflation, which, so you can imagine them as a cyclist, and the headwinds are like really getting stronger and stronger. So
Correct.
The aging population definitely will take a toll on the Chinese economy, and it may not be long if the deflation continues, because deflation means degrowth. So
Correct.
what you'll end up seeing is maybe one of the former fastest growing economies will start shrinking, maybe possibly one day. If this
It's hard to
continues.
predict. It's hard to predict. That I do agree.
Yeah.
But what Sashwath said is very true. And the reason why something similar like this was happened in Japan in 1980s.
Yes.
But the reason why Japanese did not have a full-on board meltdown is because of democracy.
Yes.
And their currency is transparent. That kind of saved them in the end. It kept them going to the point where things are slowly not
And
looking
they're
up for them.
stubborn pacifists as well.
Correct. So all these things worked in their favor. But the Chinese situation is not the same. Like how India's fragilely held country union of states, Chinese regions are also very fragilely held together. Historically, if you see, the Chinese country was never united until recently.
Yes, true.
But anyway, I hope you guys found this video informative and interesting, as always. Please do think of subscribing to our channel and turning on the bell notification icon so you'll be notified every time we come out with some new content. And we'd like to thank you again for joining us today on Be Rich.
Thank you.
I'm in Tokyo on work on the 5th of August 2023. I have a lot of following in Japan, Tokyo. Those who want to meet me in Tokyo on 5th August, kindly drop me an email on the address given below or contact us on WhatsApp there. My team would get in touch with you and facilitate the meeting. Once again, I thank you for your support for Be Rich. It's a great privilege and honor that so many of you in thousands have subscribed to my channel and have supported me. I have written 2 books in English, The Alchemy of Money and Ordinary Stocks, Extraordinary Profits. These books are published by us and are ready. If you want to procure a copy, send us a message to the WhatsApp number given below and my team would respond to you. If you want an Amazon Kindle copy, you can click the link below. Finally, those who wish to consult with me can send a mail to berichenglish@gmail.com. Once again, I thank you for your support. If you like this video, press the subscribe button of my channel, hit the like button and turn on the bell notification.